All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our regular council meeting for the County of Perth, Thursday, April 2nd, 2026, noting the start time as 9 a.m. I ask colleagues, staff, and all guests and others in attendance to please bow our heads for a moment of reflection. Thank you. I'll now read our county land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Perth County is situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, who have a long-standing relationship with the land and water throughout the region. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit people who call this territory home. As a county, we have a responsibility for reconciliation and the continued stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Okay, item 4, disclosure of pecuniary interest. I look to my colleagues, see if there's any such declaration to be made or disclosure. Seeing none at this time. If at any point throughout the meeting that you need to make a disclosure, please alert the chair accordingly. Noting that we have attendance in person today of council. Item 5, the agenda. Agenda was circulated earlier. The clerk advises there is one addition, 14.1, closed session, to deal with a matter pertaining to labor relations negotiations, verbal update, specifically regarding paramedic services. Also, due to the size of agenda item 8.1, it's recommended that we make a change to move item 8.2 under Public Works, 8.2.1, move the tender results for structure 107030 Perth Road 107 to move that item for discussion ahead of item 8.1. So with that addition and with that change, I'm seeking a mover and seconder to adopt the agenda with those two amendments. Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Wilhelm. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. All right. Moving along, we have item 6, consent agenda. We have several items there, 19 altogether. Colleagues, is there anything that you would like withdrawn or pulled for further discussion? Okay, not seeing any hands. So the recommendation reads as follows: that council receives the consent agenda items 6.1 to 6.19 and approves the March 19, 2026 council minutes. Moved by Councillor Kellum, seconded by Councillor McDermott. Any further discussion on those? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you. So moving up to item 7, public meetings, public hearings, and delegations. We have one presentation today under 7.1. It is the Conservation Authority's update, and with us we have Brian Petrie, Chair of the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. Morning, Brian. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Board and Council, thank you very much for having me today. There's a lot of familiar faces around the table, so good to see everybody. Certainly, there's been a lot of announcements lately of changes to the conservation authorities, certainly going to affect this body as well as many local bodies around the table. So my goal is to get around to every council that will be affected within the ERCA's jurisdiction and just give an update. But really what it's about is the message is communication. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of information that will be coming, and I'll explain the timelines that really that's the important part there is to keep those lines of communication open so everybody knows what their role is and how it will affect them, so it can be as painless as possible. So I will get right into it. I guess, for those who don't know me, I'm Brian Petrie. I'm the chair of the UTRCA. I was prior a couple years ago, and then returned to the chair this year. So on March 10th, the major announcement was made that kind of finalized what the new system will look like as far as geographical areas, but that was led by provincial concerns, which are there. To date, besides the area that's involved, there's been nothing in the legislative changes in the budget announcement that's addressed any of those as far as can be told, but I'm sure we'll see something come forward that way. Also part of the March 10th was the principles around that, and again, we've seen some things to try to address some of the concerns of that, but really, I think the most important one on there is continuity of services. That's something that we certainly want to see happen because of the great work that happens. We want to make sure that our residents continue to have that happen, and there's no disruptions to permits and stuff like that through this process. There we go. So the original proposal was to go to 7, and that would have saw UTRCA be a area that included the Grand River, Catfishery, Kettle, but they decided to split that into 2, and so now we're part of what they call the Western Lake Erie Region Conservation Authority, and I know Perth County will be a part of, I believe, 3 in total, but certainly that's where this one falls. The consolidation or amalgamation is expected to take place in early 2027, which we all know comes faster than we would like. So what that looks like is Upper Thames will join Essex Region, Lower Thames, and St. Clair. There is a history of cooperation through the Ten-Sydenham Source Protection Area, and that's really what the new boundaries look to have followed, is the alignment of the source protection area. Essex has a separate one, but it will join there as well. But there is a good working relationship with those CAs already, which is a bonus in this situation where there's going to be increased communication or cooperation necessary. This is from the provincial announcement as well. Now, I will touch on the first point, which is municipally governed, and there's questions about that. Now, certainly, what is changing probably the most in this scenario is the governance model, what's going to happen. And certainly that's going from lower tier municipalities, mostly around the table will pay a levy to a conservation authority, but it's upper tiers and single tiers only in the new model. The problem with it saying that it's municipally governed is the agency that was part of the original conservation back in the fall of this announcement when they introduced that legislation, its number one goal is to oversee the governance of authorities. So there's some contradictions there about where the governance actually happens. And that's certainly one of the answers that we would like clarity on about if municipalities are asked to govern these and pay for these, what kind of true source of level of governance is there at the table. It is a tight timeline. There's some things that are going to happen after the 2026 election, and then newly elected upper tier municipal councils will select their first members to the regional. So this will be this body here going forward. Certainly I can see there is some good experience around the table. Hugh with probably the most. In good nature at UTRCA, I like to jest that Hugh's been there before the Conservation Authority was made, but it's all in good fun. But certainly that's one of the concerns is that the upper tier, there's not as many chance of having conservation experience. And I'll point to Lambton County, who's never had experience with conservation authorities. It's all done through the lower tiers there. So that is a concern that there may not be as much government experience at upper tier, but certainly not a concern here, I don't think. So right now, it was originally 81 municipalities. It's now down to 39 municipalities, but still a lot of area and geography to cover. It'll include 7 counties on the left there, but also 6 single tier. You will note, you'll see Peely Township on there. They have 235 residents according to the last census. They are guaranteed a representation at the table. And St. Mary's around 8,000 is also because they're a single tier. Stratford, 33,000. You won't see, what you won't see on there is Sarnia, because they're part of Lambton County. There's going to be some contentious and questions about how representation works. But if you're a single tier, you are guaranteed a spot, a representation at the table. My guess is that Perth County is going to probably see one. So of all the representation, just by they haven't released the regulations exactly how that'll work, but they're going to limit to 15 to 20 members total across that whole area. And certainly with population, you know, you've got London with 500,000, Windsor with almost 300,000. It quickly dilutes population. And that's really one of our biggest concerns in this, in that the way that ETRCA's board structured through order and council was to ensure a balance between that rural and urban voice. And that's really what we're going to lose here. And that's what I think everybody should be very concerned about, is that loss of a rural voice at the table when those decisions are made. It's important to have that balance. There's certainly perspectives from everywhere, but I think we can all agree that, you know, we're all kind of local experts on where we live. But certainly I don't know anything about Windsor, and I don't know that as much as you find folks do about Perth County, that's for sure. So those local voices do matter, and we certainly want to make sure that that's coming, because you're going to continue to pay the levy. Now, this was originally for a single tier, but I apologize for that. The slide wasn't updated. But another thing that you're going to have to worry, there was a report from Middlesex County that they estimated it was going to be a 2.2% budget increase to their budget. Now, we all know there's only one taxpayer, and local municipalities will save, but that's going to transfer here, and you're not going to have the same representation by far. The governance structure is, again, really what's going to is fundamentally changing here. There's no question about it. UTRCA was created in 1947 by municipalities. It's under the Conservation Authorities Act that they are municipally led entities, and that they have to agree to change and forming and dissolution. But certainly with the legislation that's come out, this is now a provincially led body. And I would argue how much input any local government will have in it, except to bill their residents for the levy that's imposed upon them. And it's certainly one of those as you get that larger area and less representation, those voices do weaken around the table. One of the things that was changed in the legislation during the consultation was the adoption of watershed councils. However, each region is to create at least one watershed council to identify priorities and interests. They are input only, they are not decision-making bodies. The Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency is the provincial agency. The province appoints the board. It controls all policy, all direction. It monitors, and basically it can tell any authority what to do and what timeline to do it in. Then you have the regional governance that must comply with that, and then you have the input only from those agents, from the watershed council. So concerns about when it comes to hitting the road, who are they going to listen to? The legislation says the province, not the other way around. So hopefully that will be put through regulation, that they'll have some stronger say, but that's something that's as a concern right now. This was the transition timeline that was provided by the province. They want to have this done by early of spring next year, even though there's a municipal election. There's a lot of work to do. Right now, the agency hasn't been set up. The positions are advertised for the board members there, but they haven't been appointed. The board members have to appoint project executives to the transition team, which all have to make plans to have this done, that have to be approved by the agency. And so there's a lot of work. And so that's why my message here today is be prepared for a lot of information coming in a short time, because we just don't have the answers right now to be able to do that. But we want to be able to be good communicators and make sure that there's that feedback going back and forth, especially as an organization like this that is going to see a drastic change from what was done before. The budget process is going to be a little bit different. Conservation authorities were ordered to have their budgets for 2027 done by December 31st, 2026. UTRCA did schedule a meeting for October 6th in the hope that we could have that before the election happens, to make sure that to get that information out there and and continuity. Members do carry on till they're replaced. So that transition date that hasn't been decided by the province, they'll continue till that happens till the new regional board takes over. The budgets for 2027 will be billed as per the province to the current recipients, so the current lower tier municipalities. They will get to pay for 2027, but they will not have any say on the board members. So for this body will not get a bill in 2027 for the levy as to legislation right now, but that will be decided going forward. The province did provide $20 million in funding to create the agency, and they have since announced $3 million annual funding to be administered by the agency, and I say to support the CAs in the transition, and then going forward for projects. That works out to about $330,000 per new regional authority. The Toronto Regional Conservation Authority estimated $5 million just to change their brand. So don't be surprised if there's increased costs coming this way. The province says that's not their goal, but again, we've seen this before with school boards and health units and everything else. It's not as it's the goal is there, but there's cost involved in this, and that's the funding level that they've promised right now. Again, these are the concerns. A lot of these concerns were raised about these items. Right now, we have not had any answers to them. There is still a lot of questions. There is an update scheduled for April 9th between the chairs and the GM from the ministry, so hopefully we'll get some more information on the transition process. Mayor London, Josh Morgan, was kind enough to arrange a meeting with Rod Flack, Minister Flack, on April 8th to try to advocate and get some answers that way as well. So certainly attending that, but there is a lot of items that just can't be answered right now. The legislation that came out as part of the budget was really just the transition process. That was it, and how that's going to be run, but there's no further goals or information. They'll all be through further legislation and regulation. When the environmental registry posting went up, they received 14,000 submissions. There was, when they were correlated, these were the concerns that were identified throughout as common concerns. And yes, there's a lot of valid concerns there around that we don't know. They haven't been answered yet. Certainly keep pushing for answers. This is really a provincially led item. They've said that this is what they want to do. So we're really waiting on them to tell us how they want this to pan out and what they would like us to do going forward. But I will say right now, there will be no service disruptions. That's the whole goal of the board, is to make sure that we maintain our staffing levels. We certainly, if you have a lot of specialized staff that are hard to come by, we want to make sure that they're taken care of, and we have no service disruptions in permitting process and the funding process that we have right now going forward. So that's really our goal, is to make sure that we're good communicators on this, and that we're going to continue to provide those services until a new body takes that over, and make sure that we are complying with what the province is requesting us to do, and making sure that others are aware of what that is. So with that, I will take questions. I was collect things off the internet, and so I was lucky enough to get this. This is from 1971. It's a pamphlet from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. And in here, it was kind enough to remind us that at that time, the government provided 75% of funding for major projects and 50% of funding for other projects. That's down to about 2% funding. And so my message here today is that this drastic change in governance was not asked for by conservation authorities, but certainly it looks, reading what the province has in legislation, the loss of governance is real. The lack of policy is already gone with the legislation that made the agency. That's their responsibility now. But you are going to continue to pay the bill and have less say. So that's kind of what it looks like at this point. But I'm certainly open to any questions. And yeah, there.
Thanks, Brian. A lot of things to talk about in a short period of time. So we appreciate your detail and your brevity at the same time. So colleagues, any questions for Brian on his presentation? I don't see any. Is it possible, Brian, if council could receive a copy of your slides just for future reference?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, we do it. We have it? Okay, all right. Just want to double check. Okay, good. All right. Well, if there's no other questions for Brian, then thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate the opportunity for communication, and please keep us informed as the situation unfolds.
I'll be around to see most people's councils around the tables.
Okay, very good, thank you. So we have a recommendation that reads as follows: that council receives the presentation, Conservation Authority's update, Brian Petrie, Chair of UTRCA, for information. Moved by Councillor Kasenberg, seconded by Councillor Smith. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. All right. Staff reports. As per our amended agenda schedule, we will move to 8.2 Public Works. 8.2.1, the tender results for structure 10030 located on Perth Road 107. And joining us this morning is Bill Wilson, Director of Public Works. Welcome, Bill. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Warden Jankowski. Through you, good morning, Council. The purpose of this report is to present the results of tender 2026-031-03 for the replacement of structure 107030 on Perth Road 107 south of Shakespeare. This project includes a replacement of a cast-in-place structure that was originally constructed in 1950. Over its 75-year service life, the structure has developed several condition-related concerns, which have been documented in multiple OSIM inspection reports. The new structure will be a cast-in-place concrete box culvert with slightly increased dimensions and an improved alignment with the water course. This will support better flow through the site, and the cast-in-place structure provides an expected service life of up to 100 years. Completing this work in 2026 will ensure that the structure is addressed in advance of planned road rehabilitation work for that section of road, which is forecasted for year 2028. This tender was issued through the county's online bidding system, resulting in 15 submissions. The submissions are listed in Table 1 of the report, and Cope Construction and Contracting Incorporated was the lowest bid submission. Cope Construction is a long-established heavy civil contractor based in the Sarnia area. While they have not worked for the county previously, the county's consulting engineer on this project is familiar with them and has had positive experience on similar scope culvert replacement projects. Staff also contacted references provided and received favorable feedback, including those from the City of Sarnia and Lambton County. Cope's total tender value of $760,785.80, excluding HST, is within the project budget. The bid includes project allowances and provisional work. Additional project costs such as engineering, permits, and testing are outside the tender scope, but will remain within the overall capital budget allocation for the project of $1.3 million. And during design, during final detail design, staff and the consulting engineer evaluated the option of stage construction to maintain traffic flow during the construction. However, through the design process, it was evident that stage construction would have increased the project costs quite significantly and also extended the construction time frame by several weeks. For those reasons, the recommended approach would be to have a full road closure for this project. That is limited to 19 calendar days within the contract documents, and an established detour route using Highway 78, Perth Road 101, and Line 33 will be used to maintain traffic around the construction site for the duration of the work. The culvert work is regulated by Upper Thames Conservation Authority, and there is a water work period there that limits us to working between July 15th and March 15th. And we have received all the required permits to proceed with this work. That concludes my summary of the report, and I would be pleased to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Colleagues, any questions for Bill on this report? I just had maybe one question, Bill. So the detour route that will be coordinated with, you mentioned Highway 78, so that would be coordinated with MTO and also Road 101 with Perth East. County will coordinate those activities.
Yes, through yourself. With the MTO, we have an encroachment permit with them for the placement of signs within their road allowance. So that's been looked after. Perth Road 101, county is owner of that road, shared boundary road with Waterloo Region. And then line 33, of course, Perth East Road. We've had discussions with their staff about utilizing that as part of this detour. She was there.
I guess a follow-up, and all the related EMS services will be notified of the timing and so forth.
That's correct. They will be notified once we have a more detailed construction schedule.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there's no other questions, then we have a recommendation that reads as follows. That council receives the tender results, structure 107030 Perth Road 107 report, and that council awards tender 2026-031-03 to Cope Construction and Contracting, Inc., and that council authorizes the warden and clerk to execute the agreement between the corporation of the County of Perth and Cope Construction and Contracting, Inc. They're mover and seconder for that recommendation. Moved by Deputy Warden Orr, second by Councillor Duncan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much.
All right, now we shift into 8.1 corporate services. And under that, we have 8.1.1 tree injury bylaw draft update and presentation. Leading us in that discussion will be Lori Wolf, our CAO, as well as Stefan Zalev, our Executive Director of Corporate Services and Legal. So while Stefan gets set up there, I'll turn the floor over to Lori Wolf, our CAO, to get started.
Thank you, Good Warden. For council, we just have a procedural matter that we're asking you to take care of before we get into the discussions on the proposed changes to the bylaw. And given the interest this matter has garnered, in order to support council's discussion in open session, we're asking for a motion to waive solicitor-client privilege, and that will allow the public to see how council is informed on the legal aspects of the proposed changes. So certainly the materials are prepared with that in mind, that council would be able to waive solicitor-client privilege, and so we would have a simple resolution that we're asking for, that council waives that privilege for the April 2nd presentation and discussion on the tree injury bylaw.
Okay, thanks, Lori. So I'll turn to Clerk Sager to read out the intended motion.
Thank you. So through the warden, it would read as follows: that council waives solicitor-client privilege for the April 2nd presentation and discussion on the tree injury bylaw.
Okay, is there someone willing to move that? Councillor McDermott, second by Councillor Wilhelm. Any discussion? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Okay. Thank you. So we're able to proceed. I guess, Stefan, the floor is yours. Good morning.
Morning, Warden, Deputy Warden, Council, members of the public, colleagues. Again, for all those of you that are watching online, my name is Stefan Zhelev. I'm the Executive Director of Legal and Corporate Services, and I am the solicitor for the region, for the county. I am tasked with the presentation of the bylaw to regulate the destruction or injuring of trees in woodlands and woodlots. And the presentation is going to consist, in terms of housekeeping, the presentation is going to consist of 3 parts. I will start off with the discussion of the some of the matters that were brought up during the roadshow, which I have attended. And these are matters that have been brought up by the public and that should be considered by council when a decision is made with respect to the bylaw. The second part of the presentation would deal with some of the options that council has requested to see. So we will go through the bylaw in its entirety, and what will be presented is the current bylaw, the feedback that is received, the potential options for council to consider, as well as some comments. And at the final stage of the presentation, there will be a single slide just asking for council direction on how to proceed. At the onset, I would like to direct your attention to the fact that currently the bylaw is only intended to regulate the destruction and injuring of trees in woodlands and woodlots. We are not focused on all aspects of forestry. So there is a very narrow scope of what we are trying to resolve with the current bylaw. The existing legislation that exists, so the legislation that exists, so the bylaw is not created in a legal vacuum. There is already existing legislation. There are multiple acts that are created that already define how the bylaw should be drafted or where it should reside and what it should consider. Some of the acts that should be considered, for example, are the Forestry Act, the Planning Act, the Municipal Act, the Endangered Species, the Farming and Food Production and Protection Act. So there are a number of acts that should be considered, and the bylaw, when the bylaw is drafted, the bylaw should be drafted in accordance with that provincial legislation. That provincial legislation also has mandated the statutory duties of the municipality, and the municipality cannot act beyond those statutory duties. It is also very important for council to consider that there is, and respect, the separation of power. And what that means effectively is that council, by drafting this bylaw, effectively exercises legislative powers, executive powers, which is the implementation of the or the enforcement of the bylaw, is generally done by staff. For example, the bylaw enforcement official would enforce or implement the bylaw, and then we have the judiciary, which interprets the law. So effectively what that means is that council, generally when it creates the law, it shouldn't be the entity that interprets its own law. Another important consideration when council is going over and considering the options is the fact that we are trying to resolve a local issue. And we have considered what neighboring municipalities are doing. We have looked at other bylaws, but ultimately what we have is we already have a process that is in place and that works fairly well. And what we are trying to do is integrate best practices in light of the feedback that we have received and the requirements that we're seeking to impose. The bylaw should be again, this is a brief reminder, when we are looking at the bylaw and drafting a bylaw, we are looking at exercising powers within what the municipality can do. We want to make sure that the bylaw is drafted in good faith. We want to make sure that it is clear, that there is no uncertainty, that it's not vague, and at the same time that the bylaw does not conflict with superior legislation and the Constitution Act. It should be noted also the bylaws are meant to be living documents. This document will change with future councils. It has evolved over time, and what will be decided by council is not going to be ultimately set in stone. It can change down the line. Another question or a distinction that has been brought up during the roadshow was with respect to a policy for the tree canopy and natural vegetation, which is required under the Municipal Act, Section 270, and the bylaw. So the bylaw itself is not that policy. The policy is a much broader document that actually, in terms of a framework, would consider the existing provincial legislation. It will also consider the municipal instruments such as the official plan, the strategic plan. The bylaw would also be a part of that policy. Any programs that the county has in terms of stewardship, the education, for example, weeds, all of those combined would constitute the policy. The bylaw, again, is only one aspect of it. And what we are trying to achieve with the bylaw is we're trying to achieve a community culture of communication. And in the same way as we have province-wide call before you dig, we are looking to instill that culture of call before you cut with respect to the woodlands and woodlots that we currently have. So that is something that we are looking to address. The other important distinction is they were calls made for ease and clarity of understanding of the bylaw. And that is a very important distinction, because if we're looking for clarity, then we're looking for creating more in additional terms and defining more terms. And if we're defining more terms, then we're putting in more red tape. And that may go against ease of understanding. So we are trying to find that balance between ease of understanding and clarity when we are drafting the bylaw. So these are all considerations for council. Currently, what we have is, with the current bylaw, we have a process under the notice of intent that addresses about 95% of the cases. So the county receives about 100 cases a year. Even more than 95% of the cases are already resolved under the notice of intent process, which is pretty straightforward. And the remainder of the less than 5% of the cases potentially that could be considered, as the following slide would show, could be potentially resolved with an introduction of a permitting process. So that should be something to consider. Currently, council should be aware that the bylaw, in terms of where it measures with other municipal bylaws, our bylaw is neither too strict nor is it too lenient. The notice of intent process is fairly straightforward. It is an exercise of information gathering. It identifies the owner, the woodland or the woodlot, the contractor's information, and there is an acknowledgement with respect to the bylaw. The process is not complicated, and the role of the bylaw enforcement official at this stage is to make a determination whether the proposed activity under the notice of intent follows inside or outside the scope of the bylaw. And there are two slides that will follow, and it will be very important to understand these two slides. This is the current state, which is the notice of intent process, and potentially the next slide is the permitting process. So with the current state, what we have is the bylaw, which has a blanket prohibition for the injuring and destruction of trees and woodlots and woodlands. But it's in section 3, it allows for the good forestry cut and the diameter cut. So there are two exemptions that are currently allowed, and diameter cut being essentially logging. So woodlots and woodlands could be logged under these two potential avenues. Again, notice of intent is submitted, and then at that point, the bylaw enforcement officer is consulted, whether it's via phone. Sometimes an inspection is warranted, sometimes inspection is not. The determination that is made at this point is whether the proposed activity falls within the bylaw or it doesn't. So there isn't a formal decision, there isn't a formal approval that is granted at this point. It's just essentially a determination that is made. And if the proposed activity falls within the bylaw, then no further action is required on behalf of the municipality. If the proposed activity falls outside of the bylaw, then what happens is the landowner may choose to do nothing, or the landowner may proceed with a cut. What happens after that is that information is collected, as shown on the slide, by the bylaw enforcement official. The information is presented to the prosecutor, and then the prosecutor makes a decision on whether they would like to proceed with the prosecution or not. It is important to realize here that there is an appeal process here for a potential judgment at the Ontario Court of Justice, the OCJ. So that is afforded here. I would suggest, so I'll go over through the permitting process, and then if there are any questions, I would take those, because it is very important for the purpose of discussing the options that these two processes are understood and clearly delineated. So in terms of a proposed permitting process, potentially what council could consider to address only 5% of the cases that cannot be resolved under the current notice of intent process is a permit. That potential process would commence with an application that is being submitted, and then that application will have to be reviewed. And just in terms of like a broad strokes, council will probably need to make 5 important decisions, and I would highlight those as I'm presenting. The first one is whether council should keep the current notice of intent process, or whether council should decide to introduce the permitting process to address those 5% of the cases that are not currently resolved. The second important decision that will need to be made is with respect to the application review body, in terms of whether that application will be reviewed by county staff or whether that application will be reviewed by an application officer. But effectively what would happen at that stage is essentially a permit will be open. So it will be an open, that's where it would be open. And then if the application is approved, then we're looking at the issuing of a permit. So if the application is approved, if the application is not approved, then the landowner will be notified by a notice of decision. And if there is an entity that wishes to challenge those, potentially what council could consider, and this comes out of, again, out of the public consultation, what council could consider is the creation of an appeal body, which is again a quasi-judicial body, and the options are 3 at that stage. So one is an appeal of whether it's the permit or the notice of decision, an appeal as of right to the divisional court is option number 1. Option number 2 is appeal through a hearing officer. And then potentially an option number 3 is having an appeal committee. It is important to realize that even if the bylaw contains a clause that says that the decision of the appeal committee would be final, that decision would be appealable before the divisional court as well. What happens if the bylaw contains the clause that it is final? If the matter goes to the divisional court later on, the court would look at the language in the bylaw, and if the bylaw states that the decision of the appeal body or the quasi-judicial appeal body is final, then the divisional court will give more deference to the decision that's being made at the appellate level. So that is where the nuance lies, and it's also important to understand. And then if that appeal is granted, then the permit is issued. If the appeal is not granted, then the application is denied. Of course, as noted, there will be language in the bylaw that states that decision is final, but again, it would be subject to an appeal at the divisional court. So these two processes, again, the notice of intent process addresses 95% of the cases, and then potentially if council wants to consider the creation of a permitting process, this is something that could be considered in terms of procedure. If there are any questions on these two slides, I'll be happy to answer those.
Let's try the speakers list. Councillor McDermott, then Councillor Caseberg, and then Councillor Smith.
Just a question on the notice of intent. You can't put an appeal process in a notice of intent?
So what happens currently, at the decision where the bylaw enforcement official is contacted and they make a determination on whether or not the proposed activity falls inside or outside of the bylaw, effectively no decision is made. In theory, that there is nothing in writing from the municipality, and it makes it difficult to appeal. Like, what are we appealing if there is no decision? In theory, however, potentially an argument could be made that determination is also a subject or could fall within the ambit of the divisional court. So in theory, that could happen at the divisional court level. But to my understanding, it has never been done.
Councillor Kasenberg, you're next, please.
Thank you. My question, I mean, you've described how the notice of intent circumstance or process captures 95% of current cases or more. if
Yes,
that's following
yeah.
What you're saying. So when you talk about the permitting process, is it merely for these rare 5% or fewer cases? Or is it a possibility to substitute all such applications with a permit process?
Right. Thank you for the question. Through the warden. Yes, the intent currently is for the permitting process to address only the 5% of the cases. And these are the cases that are not addressed under the notice of intent. The permitting process will be a lot more onerous in terms of requesting additional information. Maybe an environmental impact study may be needed, maybe additional rationale drawings of exactly like what is the proposed activity. In theory, the permit process could replace in entirety the notice of intent process, but it would make it more onerous and more costly for the municipality.
Councillor Smith, go ahead.
Thanks for the warning. Thanks, Stefan. Just to Councillor Kasenberg, so if we decide to go with the permit, we're still gonna be using the intent, notice of intent and the permit process together.
Through the warden, that is correct. The intent, the idea would be that we keep the current notice of intent process because it is simple, it is straightforward, and it adequately addresses the bulk of the cases. And then for those cases that merit additional considerations and landowners want to bring it forward and make their case that they need to be allowed that specific activity, that will be considered for them within the context of that process.
Second thing, thanks. So on your permit process, just below that heading, note, excuse me, permits cannot be issued if an offense is already committed. So this, in the lower tiers, with our bylaw officers, I'm gonna use this as an example. Someone builds a deck in their backyard, and our bylaw officer or the neighbor or somebody complains. The bylaw officer goes to that residence and says, oh, you're building a deck. Essentially, he's already committed an offense, the homeowner, but typically we will, and some staff maybe help me, but I think our bylaw officer will say, oh, okay, you're building a deck, come in, give us the plans. We're gonna permit this if the deck's all good. With this, we're saying that would not happen if someone committed an offense and we say, oh, the bylaw officer's not gonna say, okay, can you come in and file the permit now and carry on?
Through the warden. My understanding is that if currently they are minor infractions potentially, those are issues that can be discussed with the bylaw enforcement official. But if we're talking about, let's say, clearing of land, that is a major infraction, then that cannot be. The information is just collected and presented to the prosecutor.
Okay, thank you.
Right, anything further, Deputy Warden Orr, go ahead,
Sure.
please.
Just to clarify, both of these permit and the notice of intent would go under legislative services, I assume?
Through the warden, yes. That is, so one of the considerations here, if I go back to, so in terms of an application review, when we say legislative service, in terms of an application review, potentially one option when the application for the permit is submitted is to be considered by county staff. And whether we're talking about county staff that comprises of, let's say, a planner or the director of public works or another individual, that may be something for a council to decide as to like who will be on that body that decides on the application. So that would be, is that answering the question?
Yeah, both of them are under, but then we'd have to choose option one or option two. So that's one of the
That
questions.
is, yeah, through the warden, that is correct.
And, sorry, one more. So at the current state, I think one of the things that probably bothers me, how it is, I don't know if you want to bring this back. Right at the beginning, we have good forestry practices cut and diameter cut.
Should we not have in there regular agricultural farm practices? Because I think this is where a lot of the confusion is coming from. Would we incorporate that, or?
Through the warden, I'm not certain, when deputy warden is saying through farm practices, are we talking about clearing land or?
Not necessarily, like if I have a bush and I back onto a farm, but the farmer comes along and wants to trim the trees so they don't damage his equipment. That's a natural farm practice to my knowledge. So I don't want the farmer to be penalized. You should be able to do that now, but there has been instances with trees falling, pushback in the bush and things happening, so can that be clarified or added?
Through the warden, in the second part of the presentation, when we're going through the actual body of the bylaw, there are two sections that have been introduced. One is for the trimming of such branches and equipment, so farming equipment can pass.
Yeah.
And the other one is for the repositioning of dead trees, which were matters that were brought at the roadshow. And those are addressed within the bylaw.
Councillor Higgins, go ahead, please.
Keep talking about this 5% but need a permit. Can you give me an example why you need a permit instead of a notice of intent?
Through the warden, for example, one of the potential considerations against that council will have to make is windbreaks, for example. And if these windbreaks are left unattended, they may, and they're in close proximity to, let's say, woodlot or like a woodland, if they're left unattended, they can become part of it. And if the landowner would want to clear cut them or remove them based on how our bylaw works, they could potentially apply for a permit to have them removed. That's one consideration, like one example. And if it's warranted, another potential possibility would be if they want to have more extensive cutting of the woodlot or the woodland, depending again on what council may decide. And if that is warranted, and if there is sufficient evidence that the activity would constitute like a good practice, I think that can be considered and that could again succeed.
I think this is just gonna confuse everything. You know what, now we have two things. The farmer's not even gonna know what they're applying for, whether they're applying for a notice of intent or whether they're applying for a permit. And if, you know what, if you want the farmers to do environmental farm plan or environmental study, whatever, they'll walk. They're not gonna do that. I'll tell you that right now. That's not what the farmers want. They want something simple. And we're not making it simple by adding another process, so. It just adds to it. We need permanent examples of why you need a permit. There should be things, if you apply, the permit applies to this, and this. It's not gonna be a gray area where the bylaw officer is gonna decide, oh, that should be a permit or that should be a notice of intent. That's not helpful at all to the farming community. I think this just convolutes it. It makes it more onerous.
Councillor Duncan, go ahead, please.
In the permit process through the warden, there's two options. County staff can review it, or we could have an application officer. Would we be looking, if we were to go the application officer route, would we be looking at someone who has a silvicultural background that is an expert in that field to review these applications then?
Through the warden, yes, potentially a registered professional forester would be somebody that could consider those applications in order to ensure that they are adequately processed.
And one more follow-up, if I could. Then when you get down to the three options, divisional court, hearing officer, or appeal committee, what would we see as a hearing officer? Could you maybe explain who that would be or what that would look like?
Through the warden, potentially what that could look like is maybe a deputy judge at the small claims court, somebody that has experience in terms of appeals, because at that point they will need to consider the legal basis on which a potential permit has been denied or a permit has been granted. We have made inquiries with the Perth County Law Association, but we haven't heard back. I would assume that we'll probably need to cast a wider net in terms of interest and potentially trying to get a hearing officer.
Any other questions? Councilor Kasenberg, go ahead.
I do find myself concerned with the possibility of sort of convoluting processes here. The notion of adding a permit process, I mean, to me, it's all or nothing. You either do it all by permit or you do it by notice of intent. And you know, we're talking about adding something that is more complex, probably more time laden, certainly more cost laden, for the sake of 5% or fewer of cases. So for me, I don't see any particular wisdom in adding a permit process at this point in time. Those 5% of cases, I think I'm with Councillor Eggetts. I really want to understand what the criteria of those cases were before I would say, yeah, let's go all in and add this permit process for the sake of managing what is very few and probably not all that frequent. And that it's just going to cost everybody more money and more process confusion. But you know, from everything I'm hearing at this point and along our journey in this as a council, the NOI process largely works. There may be occasions where it doesn't, but largely it works. And where folks seem to be most excited around windbreaks and around their failure to call before they cut, those are the things that we probably most need to focus on. That's my take.
Okay, so noted, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Duncan and then Deputy Warden Orr.
Thank you. And so I guess what I've heard from an individual in the county was when his notice of intent was not approved, he had nowhere else to go. That was his biggest concern. He had nowhere else to go after that. And originally it was suggested, you know, you could go to divisional court. Well, I don't think sending people to divisional court to figure out whether or not this application is a good application is the right route. I think that there needs to be some sort of review after the notice of intent, if the notice of intent is denied, without end up going to court and costing everybody money in a court scenario. So I maybe the permit process isn't the way to go, but I think we definitely need somebody as a sober second thought if the notice of intent is denied. I don't know if that was clear enough for everybody or not, but.
No, I think you made your point, Matt.
Thank you.
Deputy Warden Orr, go ahead, please.
Very similar to Councillor Duncan. I'm just wondering, in our current state with the proceed with prosecution, no or yes, yes, you could have a second box to say we're going to have an appeal. As similar to appeal option number 2, another hearing officer that is a deputy, or maybe a peer review. I agree exactly with Councillor Duncan.
And maybe, go ahead, Councillor Moreau.
Yes, I agree, and I'm can't help but think back to, we have land division sites on surplus farmhouse severance and such like. Why couldn't we have something similar to that here? Note of intent is denied.
Through the warden, the challenge from a legal standpoint in the current notice of appeal process is that there isn't a formal decision that the bylaw enforcement official or anybody at the municipal level makes. There is simply a determination of whether the activity falls or doesn't fall within the bylaw. So if we are considering, or council is considering a review of that decision will need to be formalized. And the formalization of that decision would look like a permitting process, like an approval. There will be some sort of approval that is granted. And generally, when approvals and permits are granted, there is potentially liability associated with it. So in theory, let's say that the last two standing ash trees are somewhere, and we grant that, the county grants that permit, and those are cut. In theory, there is some liability associated with that if somebody chooses to pursue that. So in making a decision, in finalizing and having a decision, there is that component as well to be considered. So that's why the distinction was made between the current notice of intent process, which again does not render a final decision, and the permitting process as a potential solution to address a very narrow set of cases, which is less than 5% of the cases in terms of a process.
Councillor McKenzie, go ahead.
So, this is, but trying to figure out the process here. Normally, if you had a wood lot and you want to take trees down, I know in my case, you would have a forester come in, would mark the trees, say, yep, these ones are ready, we would take these ones down. Then you go for the notice of intent. My question is, what would be a reason for the notice of intent to not be granted? Like, there has to be a reason to not grant it, and I just wonder, like, why would that be?
Through the warden, in the current bylaw, the good forestry practices with the involvement of a registered professional forester, that activity will be within most likely that activity will be within the bylaw, so that will be granted. There shouldn't be potentially an issue as to why that wouldn't be granted, provided that there is a silvicultural prescription and an involvement of a professional.
Which I guess gets back to my question again. So if it's not granted, there's obviously a reason that it can't be granted. The trees aren't legal or some obvious reason. Like, I guess to be blunt, my question is, why would a notice of intent be turned down at any time?
Through the warden, maybe the bylaw enforcement official, there may be multiple, there are multiple instances where maybe, my understanding is that as soon as there is a registered professional forester involved, they would adequately mark what can be cut and what cannot be cut. So that could potentially proceed. Why a certain notice of intent will not be successful is if it contemplates an activity, like for example, let's say clear cutting of absolutely everything. For example, that would be one example where the notice of intent will not be granted. Or there is again something that injures the woodlands or the woodlots in a way that the bylaw is not providing an exemption from. That those would be potentially the instances where the notice, I don't know if that answers the question.
Councillor Eggetts, go ahead, please.
I'm just not sure how, going back to Walter's point, if you bring in a registered professional who marks your trees, tells you what to take down, and then we have somebody else saying, oh, you can't do that. That's like me telling an engineer that his drawings are wrong because some other engineer thinks they are. So we're running in circles here. Like, I don't know how you can tell one professional he's not right if he marks them and that's he's got a degree to do that. People, the only way you can cut or log your bush is you have to have someone come in and mark the trees, whether it's the logger himself, which he is a registered person, or whether it's an independent person, but there's no way you can just go in and clear cut anyway. So I'm not understanding why we need 2 permits. We're just muddying the waters.
Councillor McKenzie.
Well, I guess to get back to my original question, like it is maybe a little muddy, but I can't honestly think of a reason that a notice of intent would be turned down unless it was something that wasn't legal. I guess is to put it in easy terms. If your trees are marked, there should be no reason that you wouldn't be allowed to take them down. It's just a notice of intent, approved, away you go.
Councillor Kasenberg.
Can I ask just a really naive factual question? Does every instance where woodlot is proposed to be altered, is in every case a registered professional forester called upon to consent to it, to help plan it, to mark the trees. Because if there are circumstances where that's not the case, then I can see where problems can creep up. But if, in fact, in every case, per your comments about registered professionals and engineering as your analogy, if registered professionals, knowing our bylaw, which is please don't harm trees, comes in and does the work, then what's the issue, right? Like, this is, I'm a little bit confused by the facts here, perhaps.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Higgins.
So when you log your bush, and we have a bush, so your best thing to do is bring in an independent person, mark the trees, then you go to the logging companies and say, I got this much board feet, that much board feet, and they bid on whether or not they're going to take it, right? If you go the other route where you just hire a logger, then you may have some issues. But the smart thing to do, and the farmers aren't stupid, they do it the other way. They log them, or they get them marked, then they go to the loggers and say, what will you pay, what will you pay? And there's a big difference in what one logger will pay to another to cut those trees down. So we're going back again, that notice intent, it's there, that's what it looks after for. This permit thing, I don't know why we need it. If the notice intent is there and you're doing it the right way. Not too many farmers just go out and say to the logger, oh, go on in and get what you want, right? That's not how it works.
To Councillor Higgins's point, and I when we did the preview, after the deputy warden, I did the preview and I reread it, I was kind of having the same questions with myself. And when I did some background research prior to today's meeting, at some point, and this would precede my time, even on county council, perhaps even municipal, at some point, the county decided when they formed the bylaw, I don't know, maybe some of the more senior members can help me out here, the intent was to not have a permit. I read that, never saw that in a video meeting, or read that. The intent was to steer away from the permit and go towards the NOI system for the very reasons we've been talking about here for the last 15 and 20 minutes. I don't know if council would like, I don't know if Marvin Smith, our bylaw officer, is here. I admit if council will permit Mr. Smith to come to the table and maybe address some of those, like Councillor Higgins had these questions about, like when would, concrete examples of when a permit would be needed. I don't know if Mr. Smith can enlighten us on that, or show some more details or not. Just to try and help us in our thought process here. Because as we go along in the discussion with the rest of the presentation, it may be, some of the questions may be answered, but I'll look to Mr. Smith to help us along here. Go ahead.
So I'll just go back to a couple of questions that were raised or comments that were raised, and I may miss something. So by all means, fill me in on that. The basic thing seems to be, when is a registered professional forester employed by a landowner prior to logging? And that happens a lot of times, but it doesn't happen all the time. I would say there's at least 40% of the time when cutting is done according to the size limits set out in Schedule A of the bylaw, and trees are not marked by a forester or someone like that. The key is whether a silvicultural prescription has been prepared ahead of time. The cases where there's major harvesting being done and a registered professional forester is used, that's a good way to do it, no question. Generally, the farmer will make more money. If it's a question of where a landowner is just cutting a small number of trees, they probably don't want to go through that process because it does cost something. And
there are a lot of cases like that. That's what I was saying, maybe 40% or more. Another example would be over the past 5 or 6 years when there's been a lot of effort to remove ash trees and living ash trees prior to the fact where they aren't valuable anymore. The county reduced the size limit for cutting ash trees, and there was a lot of work that was done without a silvicultural prescription to salvage ash trees. So there's a lot of work that goes on without a registered professional forester preparing a silvicultural prescription. That's one thing. The other thing that was mentioned is, when does a notice of intent not get approved? Well, I'll give one example that may give you some idea of how that works. I was asked by a landowner at one time if a woodlot area could be removed and made into cropland. And various scenarios occur this way, but this particular one, it was something that was certainly over half an acre in size, probably about 2 acres in size. And I looked at it and with the landowner and assessed that it met the criteria of a woodland, and advised the landowner that no, the county bylaw would protect that. Then at some time later, a notice of intent was submitted asking, or basically notifying the county that that area would be removed. So I contacted the landowner and basically said, we've discussed this before, the same result would happen, that's an area that's protected by the bylaw. The fact that a notice of intent has been submitted doesn't change anything. That's one example. I don't know that are there any other comments or questions that I should address?
Deputy Warden Moore, go ahead, please.
So going to that example, if we were aligned with the province with its woodlot size, that wouldn't be an issue.
Well, that one might have been a hectare, might have been. But the bylaw is aligned with the municipal act the way it does things now.
Through the warden. One of the matters for council to consider would be the definition of woodlot and woodland.
Okay.
So that will come later if if I can just get us back on track in terms of discussing the notice of intent and permit. If there are no questions, I will continue because there is a lot of ground to cover. If that is okay.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm just making a note here that to Councillor Agate's question, if staff could perhaps better illustrate when a permit, examples of when a permit would be where that would apply. Like you've given something verbally here, but if we could have a list, if you just formalize it in a list, that we have it for when we continue to discuss this. But yeah, I think for the sake of carrying on with the rest of the presentation, we'll note, I've noted the questions and concerns here, but if there's no more questions on those 2 slides, then we'll continue with the rest of the presentation.
Sure. Go ahead. If I could just make one comment, that example I used where a notice of intent was submitted by the landowner to remove that area of woodland, that would be a specific example that would fall into the permit system. Because the landowner then getting an answer from me that that area would be protected would be quite able to apply through the permit system, and that's the purpose of the permit system. And very few cases would that occur, as Stefan has said, but it would allow a landowner an option.
After the NOI process is, there's an impasse.
Sure.
Yes. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, all right, so that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that as we go through the rest of the presentation, the Deputy Warden Orr's comments, that it may become apparent that depending on what different options council wishes to proceed with, some of these, I'll call them the 5% cases, may vanish, depending on, we'll go through the rest of the presentation, we'll carry on with the discussion, but there's something to keep in mind here as we proceed, that some of these 5% may, that list may shorten up significantly depending what we do here. So thanks, Mr. Smith, and so back to you, Stefan, with the
Thank you.
presentation. And noting the time's 10:15, so at some point we'll have a comfort break here at about 10:30, I think, just to keep everybody fresh and at work. So
I think,
we'll
yeah.
carry on for another 14, 15 minutes before we take a
Thank
break.
you. Thank you, Worth. One of the other matters that was brought up during the open house was the right of entry. So the bylaw enforcement official is actually a provincial offenses officer under the Provincial Offences Act. And they're also a municipal bylaw enforcement officer under the Municipal Act as well. So there are two acts that prescribe what their obligations are and what their mandate is in terms of right of entry. There is very little that the bylaw can do in terms of trying to limit those powers, because again, the bylaw cannot contravene provincial legislation. It is important to note that the Security from Trespass and Protecting Food Safety Act, the Biosecurity Act, was mentioned and brought up. And the way it operates is, for example, Section 5 has a blanket prohibition, so no person shall enter in or on an animal protection zone on a farm without prior consent of the owner or occupier of the farm. However, this prohibition in Section 5 do not apply to a person who is authorized, appointed, or designated to exercise a power or carry out a duty, and who is acting in the course of exercising the power or carrying out the duty under the Municipal Act or any other act of the Province of Ontario, which will be the Provincial Offences Act. So that would, again, carve out the roles and obligations of the bylaw enforcement official as a provincial officer. It is something, however, that can be done within the current context, for example, of notice of intent or a permit, is potentially there could be consideration given to the fact that the landowner could notify us that there are factors such as animals or bees or, for example, crop that should be considered. In terms of standard operating procedure, something that we could do as well is make sure that every time there is an inspection of a property, that the bylaw enforcement official is disinfected or is wearing those blue slippers, so that there is little risk of contagion or transferring any contagion. Those are steps that could be taken. Those are reasonable and rational steps that could be taken as a result of that. Another potential issue that was brought up to us was the tree registry. The tree registry is a database documenting species, generally within an urban setting or a conservation-driven large tree projects or ancient trees. The focus of the current bylaw is injuring of trees, so the tree registry actually falls outside of the scope of the bylaw. It's not something that council at this point, within the context of the current bylaw, can consider. In terms of landowners who are interested in preserving their trees, of course, I'm not providing them with legal advice. This is not legal advice, but the land trusts are a potential option that they should consider in terms of trying to take steps and preserve their legacy. So I would say that this is probably a good spot for us to end the presentation, and then once we come back after the break, we can tackle the
Into the next section.
end of the next, yes.
All right, yeah, before we do that, I'll just, look to see if there's any more questions. Councillor, let's go ahead.
Not a question, but a comment. I realize that they can go where they want to go and do what they can. But you know, at the lower tiers, we ask that when our bylaw officer goes out to someone's property, that they knock on the door, they identify themselves. And I don't have a problem then with people coming on my land, but if I see someone walking around that I have no idea who they are, I don't care what they got on, that irks me. Yesterday, I came up in my yard and I got 3 hydromen standing there. Well, what are you guys doing? Oh, no concern of yours. I said, well, you're in my yard. It's my concern. They were changing my meter. Same thing with this, as a courtesy. And we do it in Perth East, and it works very well. Council was instructed that when you go on someone's property, you let them know you're coming as a courtesy. Guess what? I, as a landowner, are going to receive that person a whole lot different than if I just see them wandering around on my farm.
Through the warden, in terms of, yes, conversations that we can have in terms of trying to improve communication, that is something that we can try to potentially implement. The challenge sometimes is that the landowners, especially if they own multiple farms, they are not there. The challenge is that they are people with equipment sometimes that are cutting trees, so it really depends on the situations. There are instances where, for example, like large dogs could be released. There are many instances, but in general, we will try to instill that, and where possible, that communication can happen.
And I guess further to Councillor Agnes's concern, I would tend to agree that it's better when notice is given to the landowner, just because every property has its own set of circumstances. Like in my case, I don't have animals, but I have crops. And I know that if there's rust or some kind of mold in a wheat field, if it's like there was a bit of a problem in the area last summer, I believe, it can be easily transferred. Someone walks through field A on property X, and then they go to field B on property Y, 2 different landowners, or even the same landowner, different fields. There's potential just from walking through one field that mold or disease it carries on the clothing, and walking through, you can contaminate another field. And that's a significant financial impact to that grower. So yes, we can discuss this further on protocols, procedures, and get something that addresses these concerns that the landowners and those of us at the table are already aware of. So any other questions? Okay, so it's 10:22. Let's get back here at 10:30 because we've got another big section to go. So with council's permission, I'd like to call for a recess at 10:22. Councilor McDermott, you move that. Second. Deputy Warden Orr, all in favor? Okay, we're in recess for about 15. Okay, we're back from our comfort break. It's 10:32. So Stefan, please continue with the next segment of your presentation, please.
Thank you, Warden. Through you, if we may go to the slides back again. And this is the current slide thank you. So in the break that we've had a consultation with the executive based on what was expressed by council. A potential consideration for council at the end of the presentation may be that at the stage where is the project determination, is the project compliant with the bylaw or not? Maybe a potential consideration should be given to a peer review process there, where an additional professional forester reviews the decision that the bylaw enforcement official makes in terms of determination. That is something for council that council may consider at that point to see if that addresses the issue, if the permitting process is too onerous to be considered, and it's something that historically previous councils have chosen to not pursue. But with that, I'm just planting that seed. I'll go over the presentation of the body of the bylaw. We'll go over some of the potential options and public feedback that was received, and you'll be able to see the options that are presented for you. So currently on the screen and before you, you have a document that is divided in three parts. One on the left side is the current bylaw. In the middle section, we have options for council to consider, as well as public feedback. And on the right side, we have comments. On the paper copy before you, I'll just like to make a note. My understanding is that the recommended options are supposed to be red. They are, however, highlighted in blue, and the feedback received by the public is also blue, but it's not highlighted. So just so that you see that. In the very beginning, so the bylaw commences with the recitals. The recitals, generally, the intent of the recitals is to provide the legislative context within which the bylaw is drafted. So in this instance, we have section 135(2) and 135(10) that mandate that the council of the county is authorized to enact the bylaw, and then that the lower tiers have delegated to the upper tier their authority to pass the bylaw. And in the current version of the bylaw, the purpose of the bylaw is also within the recitals. And it's recommended that there is a separate section of the bylaw, section number 1, which would be the purpose of the bylaw separated. Some of the public feedback that was received is reflected as well. It is much broader. It talks about council trying to instill confidence, acceptance, partnership, and cooperation of landowners, specifically or especially agriculturally zoned land. The bylaw is for absolutely all landowners, and that is something that we have tried to specifically communicate in the proposed section of the bylaw. In terms of, for example, there are some statements for counties blessed with a high percentage of arable land. The council is trying to keep an agricultural perspective in recognizing the farmland. I mean, all of those are communicated through the options that are considered within the bylaw that is currently there. So our suggestion would be to keep the recitals very brief in terms of where the statutory authority comes for the bylaw, and then within the context of the purpose. So the current purpose is taken out. So it would read, the purpose of this bylaw is to protect, preserve, and enhance the forest, soil, fish, wildlife, and water resources within the county of Perth by regulating activities that may injure, destroy, or remove trees, while promoting good forestry practices and to achieve the objectives of the county's official. Subsection 2 would be the bylaw sets out the standards, approvals, and responsibilities required when property owners undertake tree-related activities, and defines the enforcement measures, penalties, and remedial obligations that apply when such activities occur without compliance, ensuring consistent and responsible stewardship of tree canopy and natural vegetation across the county. In this instance, we're trying to tie in the bylaw with the overall policy framework that the county will ultimately have. And then subsection 2C would be aimed to promote culture of cooperation between all property owners and the county. So again, looking to have a much broader impact. In terms of the definitions, I would suggest that we deal with the definitions last and just go over, because we don't know exactly what definitions would be addressed based on some of the decisions that will be considered. And just go to maybe page 11. So the general prohibition, so again, the general prohibition is the general prohibition, very similar to the Fire Protection Act. So no person by themselves or through any other person shall destroy or injure or cause or permit to be destroyed or injured any living tree located in a woodland or woodlot within the county. So that would remain. In section 3, we have again, we would probably, the suggestion is to keep the current good forestry practice and the diameter cut or circumference cuts for logging purposes. What we are suggesting with section 3A, ash trees, is the removal of that section, so that section, because that section is currently being dealt with in Schedule A by reducing the size of ash, thereby including it there. There is no public feedback presented with respect to that specific section. It's more for like a housekeeping item. In terms of drainage work, again, the drainage works described in section 4 are effectively other offenses. So the recommendation is to move those two drainage works clauses or sections, which are rarely used as far as I understand, to the section with other offenses. We have received some feedback from the public, specifically adding a section 3, which says the county and or lower tier municipality shall direct a drainage superintendent to remove from any drainage work all weeds and brush, wood, fallen timber, or other obstructions for which the owner or occupant of the land adjacent to the drainage work may not be responsible, and the cost of such work is chargeable as part of the cost of maintenance of the drainage work. This is language taken directly from the Drainage Act, and there's no need to reiterate it again here. And again, it falls outside of the scope of what the bylaw is trying to do. So again, the recommendation at this point is mainly just to move the drainage sections to other offenses. In terms of exemptions, in section 5, the bylaw does not apply to activities undertaken by the county or lower tiers, activities under the Crown Forestry Sustainability Act, the Surveyors Act, the Planning Act, Electricity Act, the Aggregates Resources. So there are a number of exemptions here. There is a public comment that was received with section 9, which specifically talks about a sizing change, where we are seeing a change in 20 meters instead of 15 meters. So effectively having a much broader or bigger envelope around the building. It's my understanding that the 15 meters is an adequate envelope, provided that there aren't very many trees with 20-meter branches. But again, it is something for council to consider if that change may be implemented. Going forward, so section 10, section 11 would stay a minor in terms of clearing trees. So in section 12, just the word officer there, which we'll be talking about definitions later on. But what we're suggesting here is the inclusion of two other sections. So one is selective trimming of tree branches, which was brought up in the discussion. So selective trimming of tree branches located in an area along the edge of a field used to plant crops immediately adjacent to a woodland or woodlot, where such branches have overgrown and impede the safe and efficient passage of agricultural machinery or equipment. So that will be allowable. All selective trimming shall be limited strictly to branches necessary to provide reasonable clearance for farming equipment, be carried out in a manner consistent with good forestry and silvicultural practices, avoid unnecessary harm to the health, stability, and long-term viability of the trees, and not involve the removal, destruction, or killing of any tree. So that is the selective trimming provision that is proposed for council's consideration. Section 14, repositioning of dead trees located in an area along the edge of a field used to plant crop immediately adjacent to a woodland or woodlot where such trees have encroached upon cultivated areas or access routes. The repositioning or pushing back of such trees into the woodland or woodlot area shall be conducted using methods designed to preserve the life and structural integrity of the trees, not result in the cutting, removal, or destruction of any living tree, and be limited to the minimum extent necessary to restore reasonable agricultural use or access. Again, those are provisions that are presented, again, based on feedback that we've received and in trying to strike a balance between the interests of stakeholders.
Deputy Warden Moore, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Stefan, I love that we have printed, but it's really hard to follow your presentation, how fast you're going.
Okay.
So, and can you clarify, I was under the impression that the blue was what the comments were from the people and that the red were the recommended comments that we want.
Yes, so.
We were recommending.
That's right, the staff, or the staff is put forward. So, yes, so the staff recommended comments were in blue and are highlighted, are underlined right now.
In blue and underlined.
In blue and underlined, yes.
Okay, and then what are the red and underlined?
The red, they're not shown unfortunately on this copy. At least I have a copy that
I'm totally red.
I'm holding blue.
Because it's right on my computer. Is it not right on our computers that we got?
No, it's right.
Yeah,
It is
that's why
right.
I'm
It is
using my
right.
computer.
But it's not, this isn't right then, because that's where
I think my copy isn't right, but that's okay, that's okay. I know it, so I will correct that right away.
So we should go through the
Sorry.
computer one?
Yes, no, they're all the same, I think on my copy, I think it was marked as blue.
Yeah, I've got public feedback comments on my printed copy are blue. And staff recommended options are red underscored red.
I apologize for that confusion.
Okay, because I was,
I apologize for that confusion.
okay.
I don't have any, right? Okay, so, recital, okay, start from the beginning, I'll start from the beginning.
Can we clarify, it appears we have different copies, because I don't have any red in my copy.
Either I got blue.
Mine's a blue.
The text within the document, I am certain is the same. It's probably when the printer is printed, the red has probably been done, and it just printed blue for some of the versions.
Where it's noted under, in the middle column, there's where it says public feedback. I think that's noted there, and then usually where it's staff option, it says recommended option.
That's right. Staff option says recommended option, and public feedback is noted as public feedback within the column.
To help some of the other members.
So for example, recommended option, if you go just very quickly to page 1, recommended option is the recital here on the screen, the very first page. Then is the public comment, which is a much broader recital. And on page 3, we have the purpose section. Page 3 is the purpose, which is the new section that's recommended, and that's in yellow, or it's underscored. Then we're moving on to skipping definitions for a moment, going to section 11.
Maybe
Sorry, page 11.
page numbers, maybe our people.
Yeah. Oh, that's page 11. General prohibition. And then going to page 12, which is exceptions, which is the silvicultural prescription, good forestry practices exception, and then the diameter cuts. Page 13 is the removal of the ash. Page 14 is the moving of the drainage works section to other offenses. Page 15, just the exceptions that would stay in place. Page 16, we have the sizing change potentially to subsection 9. Page 17, we have the selective trimming and the repositioning of dead trees where we were last. Okay, we're all on the same page now? Okay, good. Great. So in terms of section 6, so section 6 is the notice of intent process. Again, the potential option here is to retain the current process. Currently, it allows for good forestry practices and diameter cuts. As you can see, so this is on page 17. On page 18, the suggested approach, originally the suggested approach was the creation of a permit. If you go to page 19, so this is public feedback that was received. So I'll read it all. So inclusion of an exemption/appeal committee, notwithstanding any provision contained in this bylaw, the normal way a person may request an exemption from this bylaw beyond those exemptions contained in section 5 would be after a decision by the officer has been made to a previously submitted notice of intent permit. Everyone, however, is entitled to an exemption or appeal, whether or not a notice of intent permit was obtained. Okay, I'll just provide some comments here, like legally speaking. So we have, in this instance, what is proposed is the fusing of the two processes, which is a notice of intent and a permit in one, which again are different in terms of the fact that notice of intent does not have a formalized final decision that is issued by the municipality, and the permit has such a decision. And that is important to make a to distinguish. And so moving forward, so every person who intends to obtain such an exemption appeal shall complete and submit an application in the form prescribed in Schedule C to this bylaw, containing all the information required of the application, not less than 45 business days and not more than 180 days prior to the start of any injury of trees. That's more a procedural piece that's added there. And then the other comment is where an exemption appeal has been filed, the exemption appeal committee shall hear the exemption appeal and have all the powers and function of the officer. The appeal committee shall have 5 members, which are the warden and the councillors, 1 from each of the 4 lower tier municipalities. The challenge with that proposal is that council cannot be the entity that would, after it has created the bylaw, it cannot be the entity to interpret its own bylaw. It has to be a different process, or it has to be a different body comprised of different individuals. So when we were discussing the notice of intent process, potential consideration of the notice of intent process, if permit is not going to be considered, is a potential peer review of the decision of the bylaw enforcement officer. This is just that would fall strictly within the notice of intent, which is again the simpler process than the permitting process. The alternative would be to create a permitting process for absolutely all applications, which would be, again, a lot more onerous, a lot more red tape, and it will be costlier. So moving forward to the permitting section, the original intent, again, was to discuss a potential avenue of what permitting would look like. I don't know at this moment if there is appetite, if I should go through the entire permitting process again, if that's not something that council would consider or could consider. I'll go over, like, the work is done. We might as well just go over the permitting process, just so that you can see at least what it looks like in terms of potential options.
Just to simplify things though, as you were going through before, when I read the permit process, I really look at it as the appeal process. Could there not be any way we could fuse it that way? If the notice of intent doesn't work, it's just the change of word, the title.
Through the warden, the challenge the challenge of including an appeal process in the current notice of intent is the fact that there is no decision that is made at the notice of intent stage. The only decision that is made is the only determination that is made is whether the activity falls within or outside of the bylaw. And the intent, I think, at the time was to simplify, to have a more informal process than a permit when that was originally adopted. And now we're trying to tack onto it an appeal process, but what exactly is being appealed? The decision, the determination that the activity falls inside or outside of the bylaw, which would effectively be handled by, probably more appropriately handled by a peer review to see whether indeed that is the case.
Councillor Agates and then Councillor Duncan.
I'm gonna go back to the comment, this is less than 5%. We're spending a humongous amount of time on something that is very, very small. If they don't like the process, go to court. I'm sorry. That's how you do it. We're spending way too much time in this, and it's gonna be way too much onerous. We're supposed to be simplifying the process, and adding this permit, to me, does not simplify it.
Councillor Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, through the warden, I think the suggestion of just having a peer review if the notice of intent is turned down is the solution to this. That way it does give an individual that feels he needs another avenue, it gives them the avenue. If at that point, the peer review decides, yes, it's, the notice of intent refusal was correct, then they have the position, they can go to court then. But at least it gives them the chance to be heard, a sober second thought with another person looking at it. And then, the next step then for them is to approach the court system and then go that way with it.
So are you able, Councillor Duncan, to elaborate on who's the peer? Who is that? Is that?
It has to be an RFP, like registered professional forester.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood. Okay, thank you. Councillor Kasenberg.
So one of the things that intrigues me here is what we heard from Mr. Smith, which is that about 60%, if I was following the math, of these notice of intents actually are supported by the work of a registered professional forester. So, if a registered professional forester, as I understand it, there's code of conduct, and there's duties that they have to be honest and to be fair and all that kind of stuff. If they're doing work in our county, well, I think it would be part of their professional standards to know the county's bylaw and the county's policies broadly with regards to this. So my point here is that if a landowner is issuing a notice of intent and attaches the work or the testimony, certified something from a professional forester, then to me that should breeze through the system, right? Someone who is putting their professional reputation at stake, this should not be quibbled. This should, in fact, maybe doesn't even need, we want to know perhaps, maybe doesn't even need a serious set of eyeballs on it. It's the 40% that we have to ask questions about. And perhaps then, as we think about our process, we need to sort of tweak the process to say where a notice of intent is filed with a registered professional forester endorsing through whatever it is, silvicultural prescription, then largely we're taking note of the action, which is what a notice of intent would mean. And where it's not filed that way, then there's sort of an opportunity if there's some kind of rejection for peer review. To me, that kind of wraps a more meaningful approach and encourages the engagement of professionals right up front, who have to understand our policies to actually do their work according to their own code of conduct.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McKenzie.
Well, I think just further, Councillor Kasenberg has said, and from what Mr. Smith has indicated, I think our problem is with some contractors, logging contractors. Maybe that's where we need to concentrate on our work that, you're not allowed to do any type of logging activity without a notice of intent. And I had thought that had fell by the wayside, because I know years ago you used to have a logging contractor would come in, we'll give you X number of dollars for your bush and we'll take out what's ready. But apparently they must still exist. So probably need to educate whoever logs in this area. And we should have a pretty good idea who logs in this area just from the contractors that are on the list of notices of intent.
So noted, thank you. Anything else? CEO Wolf?
Through the warden, I think keeping the notice of intent and having the opportunity for a peer review or second opinion on the interpretation that they were first given in situations that are rare, that they don't meet the content of the bylaw. This gives them a very simple way to be able to access that second opinion. Staff could take that away, draft it up so you could see what that would look like. And then, of course, there'd be the issue of the cost of that second opinion, and that would be dealt with through your fees and charges bylaw, whether or not you wanted that absorbed or because it's a fee for service. And it would be a rare fee for service because it's less than 5% that we would anticipate ever using this. We could bring that back, and that's put in your bylaws once a year. We look at your fees and charges bylaw. So.
Go ahead, Stefan.
Through the warden, while CEO Wolf is thinking of the fiscal considerations, I'm thinking of the legal considerations. And the fact that the decision that would be issued by the peer review professional will have to be structured as a decision. So it would have to be formalized somehow from a legal standpoint so that it actually is subject to a subsequent review in court, where we have presented an alternative to formalize that process. So that is something for us to consider and come back to you with specific option of how that would look.
So to your point, then it would, you say a structured decision. So if it was a tribunal ruling, it would, as an example, the decision would have, it'd have to be a written decision with reasons and references.
It would have to, through the warden, it would have to have written decisions with reasons and rationale as to why the proposed activity is or isn't allowed.
Yeah, okay, and you can, staff, if so directed, staff could provide.
That's right.
An example template.
That's what I'm envisioning. That's what I'm thinking about right now as it's being discussed. Yes.
Okay, very good. Any other questions at this juncture? If not, I'll have Stefan proceed. I think we were on page 20.
On page 20, the question that I potentially whether we should continue with the permit. I can walk. I'll just have a brief overview of the permit sections here.
No, I think we'll
Okay.
the appetite's not there, so.
Following council's appetite then. Moving on to section 7, which is the stop work order. The public feedback that was received, so this is on page 23. The public feedback is on page 24. The committee may revoke the order or the stop work order. Well, this section that we have in the bylaw currently is actually taken out of the municipal act, and it provides guidance as to what the current the bylaw enforcement official or the provincial officer has. So there is pretty much nothing that we can do in terms of removing this section, which is section 7 or section 8. These are statutory sections. We have just reproduced them here for the benefit of the people that are the reader of the bylaw, so that it's all in one place. Service of an order is section 9, so that would remain. Moving on to section 10, which is other offenses, which is on page 25. They are minor, again, housekeeping changes to section 3 that are proposed. Again, section 4 deals with permits, so that would be modified. Section 6 deals with permit, that would be modified. And again, section 7 is the drainage that, again, for housekeeping from section 4, so that all the other offenses are listed together. Penalties remain in section 11. Section 12 is enforcement. Severability, administration, section 13.
Sorry, Stefan, there's a question.
To the chair, when you talk about drainage, talking just about municipal, so if I, as an independent farmer, and wanted to make a drain connect up with another drain or something like that, that wouldn't be covered under this, right?
So actually, section 7, I'll read section 7 through the warden. Except for municipal drainage work, if the injury or destruction of trees is intended to construct drainage work, the person intending to cause or permit such injury or destruction by themselves or to another must comply with this bylaw. So we're talking about private drains. Here, private drains.
I just want to be sure.
Yes. And except for municipal drainage works, every person commits an offense who by themselves or through another constructs or causes or permits to be constructed tile drainage works consisting in whole or in part of perforated tile through or within 5 meters of a woodland or woodlot. So that is what it currently, and it is meant specifically for private drains. Okay.
Good, you?
No.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Thank you. So section 11 is penalties, section 12 enforcement. Again, in terms of, I have spoken about, we have received public feedback in terms of the right of entry provisions, which I had addressed. Where possible, that professional courtesy, those conversations will be had, where possible that could be potentially established. In terms of schedules, so currently we have a Schedule A, which determines the minimum circumference or diameters. This is on page 29. Of trees, ash is dealt with by having a reduced diameter. What we would like to do in the reiteration of this bylaw is we would like to have all the schedules, actually all the forms or notices of intent, everything included as schedules to the bylaw so that everything is in one place. And all the landowners that are reading the bylaw can see all the forms. If there are any fees, potentially those will be included here. I know that during the roadshow, one of the issues that was discussed was invasive species. That will also be included here as well, potentially listing a number of invasive species that could be removed by landowners. Again, we would like to see some sort of consultation there, just in terms of determining that these are indeed the invasive species that the landowner thinks, in terms of identifying them. In terms of good practices, it's always advisable to take pictures before and after of anything, even if it's, let's say, repositioning of trees or cutting a branch, just so that if there is ever an issue, that is documented. And with that is the end of the bylaw, but we will go back to the definitions because one of the very important decisions that council will have to make is with respect to some of the definitions that will need to happen. So going back to page 3 is where the definitions of the bylaw start. So there is a potential recommendation for a Christmas tree plantation for council to consider. In terms of the appeal committee and permitting, again, that would be decided based on the guidance and direction that we received today. The living snow fences. So it's very interesting that the living snow fences definition that has been received as public feedback actually ties in very closely with one of the big ticket items that council will need to decide, which is whether woodlots would remain within the current bylaw. And the same holds true for windbreaks, because windbreaks generally, if left unattended, could become a woodlot. But they would most likely not become woodland. So that would be something to consider. So permit and permitting application, of course, that will be dealt with. Again, as mentioned, the tree registry, it falls outside of the bylaw. That's something that we have received as public feedback. Tree plantation, a wooded area of trees. Again, that's something for council to consider whether that would be included as a definition. And then we have windbreaks. And there are a number of options for council here when we're talking about windbreaks. But potentially before windbreaks is discussed or touched upon, the big consideration and discussion should be had about woodlands and woodlots. So currently, as we are all aware, woodlands is defined under the Forestry Act, and that is the minimum that can exist. Previous councils have chosen to add the definition of a woodlot, further regulating the injuring of trees within smaller areas. And again, within certain parameters that exist, so that is on page 10, the definition of woodlot. And one of the decisions that council will need to make is whether, based on, again, public feedback, which advocates not defining the woodlots and removing them from the protection of the bylaw will be of critical importance. And with that, actually, that decision of woodlots would probably tie in with the decision on windbreaks and the snow fences as well. So that is something to be considered. And that is probably the end of the overview of the bylaw. In terms of next steps, so we had a slide proposed. In order for us to come back to council with a refined version of the bylaw, we needed direction on 5 items that were identified. So one is retaining the definition of woodlot, deciding on the definition of windbreaks, whether a permitting process would be adopted, what would that review look like, and then potentially what would the appeal process within the permitting process would have looked like. But if council is not leaning towards having a permit, then potentially the direction that would be needed is for staff to develop options with respect to, within the notice of intent process, formalizing the decision and having it peer reviewed and of course prepared for further appeal, opening up the opportunity for landowners to receive access to the judiciary through the notice of intent process. So that's what we are asking you to consider today.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. CEO Wolf, did you have anything to add before I open up the floor to councillors?
So through the board, I was just gonna suggest if we could deal with the NOI one first and get it off the table, so then you can focus on the other two, the definition of woodlot.
Councillor Kasenberg, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Warden Trentusky. So, yeah, I think that's where we start. And I see a lot of heads nodding to the idea of coming back with a revised option around the notice of intent process that includes the opportunity to eject a peer review. I would assume that peer review doesn't necessarily need to happen if there's already a registered forester's opinion or professional forester's opinion in this process. Like, I really think that gums up the works. And if a professional forester has already weighed in on behalf of the person seeking to notify the county that they intend to do action, that largely it should be in order. It needs to be in order for their professional credentials to apply. So it would be an awfully rare day when it wasn't in order, I would think.
Right.
Therefore, peer review largely applies to the and only as a possibility, in my opinion, to those circumstances of the 40% that don't come in with a professional forester's opinion on this. And I think that's how I would try to structure it. And yes, I think it requires a warranted written decision at that point, right? Like you said, for the purposes of substantiating for judicial appeals should a landowner choose to do that.
Through the warden, just to clarify, the initial contact with the bylaw enforcement official determining the proposed activities, whether the proposed activity falls within or outside of the bylaw, that would be informal. And then only after, if that is challenged, in order to try to keep it simple, only after if it is challenged will the notice of intent kind of crystallize into effectively a peer review that would be written with the decision with a subsequent potential. So almost like an application to review the determination. If that is that what is contemplated for the work?
Yes.
Thank you.
I had something drafted.
Well, I just wanted, before we get there, Clerk Sagers, go around the table and make sure that if there's any other instruction or direction that we need to give council on the item 3. Okay. Deputy Warden, go ahead.
Just clarifying, we're putting in for draft, and then we're going to review again.
Yes. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, then Clerk Sager, go ahead.
Thank you. So for the warden, understanding where council may be going with this, and I might need a little bit of guidance on whether or not we want to add the silviculture prescription as part of it. But what I've drafted is that council endorses a formal peer review process to be included in the training bylaw, where the peer review but be completed by a registered professional forester, should the notice of intent be determined to be non-compliant with the bylaw by the officer.
So that's the direction we want to give, that if council wishes, we want to give that to staff to come back into the next rendition of the draft. And this is for item 3, or I call it item 3 on the sheet here, so. Okay, read it one more.
Absolutely. So through the word, that council endorses a formal peer review process to be included in the tree injury bylaw, where the peer review be completed by a registered professional forester, should the notice of intent be determined to be non-compliant with bylaw by the officer.
So is there, that's a recommendation. Is there a mover and seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Duncan so moves. Councillor Kasenberg seconds. Any further discussion on that recommendation or direction? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Okay. So we have that direction. Staff. The other two, getting into the definitions, councillors, what are your wishes on not just woodlot or windbreaks, but any other definitions that have been presented? Councillor Kasenberg.
Well, it may seem like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth for a moment, and that's not necessarily uncommon. But certainly over the years, I have advocated strongly for windbreaks at this council, and yet in this particular case, I find myself wondering whether it is reasonable to automatically assume that windbreaks of a certain size or that sort of mature and grow to a certain size wind up being protected in the way that this bylaw intends. And I have to admit to feeling a certain discomfort with that, because if anything, it could put a chill, pardon the expression, on planting windbreaks or doing something about windbreaks, when in fact what we want to do is accelerate their implementation, especially if you ask me along Highway 23. I find myself thinking that we may need to find some provisions with regards to windbreaks, and perhaps it's definitional, I'm not sure, that would allow maintenance and removal of windbreaks under some circumstances. I think that we want to encourage windbreaks, whether it's rows of trees or whether it's corn, as much as feasible in our county, and we've committed to such through our stewardship program. So I think we need to be really careful about that definition of windbreak, and I'd rather not see a windbreak declared a woodlot and all of a sudden a whole bunch of protections fall on it that may not be reasonable, may not be practical. So for me, I think it may be definitional, and I would prefer loosely to give guidance from council to staff that they give some consideration to how they can leave woodlots and windbreaks apart in a way that gives some permission for their removal should it be needed without incredible rigmarole.
It's the first time, council, I've heard that term used at a meeting.
Rigmarole. Oh, well. Stick with me, Warden. Trust me, I'll find a few more.
So to clean woodlots and windbreaks. Okay, Deputy Warden, I think you had your hand up there. Or Councillor Wilhelm.
I agree with Councillor Kasenberg, but I think we should include living snow fences in that along with the windbreaks. If we're going to encourage planting of living snow fences and windbreaks, then we should allow the farmer or the property owner the freedom to control them the way they see fit.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Deputy Warden North.
So if we were to start at 1 and have the discussion about retaining the definition of a woodlot, that might actually solve question number 2 for the windbreaks.
Okay, well, that's where I was
Okay.
thinking similar. Did you want to lead that discussion on woodlots and Deputy Warden or?
Well, I was trying to find the page in here where we have it's 1.6.
Page 10. Page 10.
So, based on how large our county is, and I have to go back to the farmer's bylaw. I know, that's come out numerous times, but that has been backed by the dairy producers, pork producers, beef farmers, many organizations. And I clearly think that the number one thing that comes out of that bylaw is that you remove the woodlot, because they want to go to the provincial standard. So leave woodlands at the provincial standards, and we're talking about smaller woodlots, and then that also wouldn't have the wind breaks. Now, the smaller woodlots, I think Councillor Wilhelm had a conversation with the conservation authorities, and they were also saying if you can properly maintain the woodlands, I think it would be better for the wood lots. And I'm not saying everybody's going to cut their wood lot out. I'm certainly not. But if we are going with an agricultural perspective, I think that we have to support all of these people that have sent in letters of support for the farmer's bylaw and take that wood lot out.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Warden Orr. Anyone else? Councillor Agatz, go ahead, please.
I agree. I think we need to simplify it. We keep talking about how we can make this easier. I think we need one definition, and they're looking for the provincial definition. So I think we go with woodland. I think people are still gonna plant the windbreaks. Farmers realize the benefits of them. It protects their soil, it does many things for their land. It also stops the snow from getting on the road. And they get this like a house, someday your house, you come to the decision, do I tear my house down or I build a new one, right? And it's the same with the windbreak. Someday it's going to get to the point where you probably have to take it down and then plant a new one because it's got too big, too wide, too onerous, too whatever. It depends how much time they spend trimming them and that. But I think one definition is what the ratepayers are looking for, and I think woodlots do should.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion, councillors, on the woodlot definition? Okay, good. Stefan, you have.
Through the warden, if I may direct your attention to page 11, something that I did not mention. So one of the comments that was received in public feedback was, and I'll read it, for the purposes of this bylaw, the boundary of a woodland will be defined by its property boundaries. It would be one woodland, even though it is divided into 2 or more property boundaries. So the woodland definition is defined by the province, and property boundaries are not the defining boundary of that woodlot. So the bylaw again cannot go against provincial definition in that regard. So woodlands would be the woodlands that are defined in the Forestry Act, and that would be it. Just wanted to make that very clear. And the other point, if council is determined with respect to windbreaks and living snow fences, and they want to make it clear that those would be exempt, that is something that should be considered as well, just in terms of clarity, providing clarity for the landowners that if that is to be the case, then those should be defined regardless of like woodlots. But I thought it was important that to mention that the two are connected, but it is also very important that windbreaks and living snow fences, if that is council's wish, should be defined.
Councillor Casey,
I'm seeking some factual information again. Do we have any idea what proportion of the county's total tree cover would be covered by the definition of woodlot as it currently stands?
I believe, I believe that was a question raised in an earlier meeting, but I'll turn to staff for that response.
Through the warden, yes, that was a question raised by Councillor Duncan at an earlier meeting. So the total area of Perth County is 538,630 acres. Do you prefer it in hectares or acres?
Acres, please.
Okay, so approximately 540,000 acres. The total forest cover.
Sorry, does that include Stratford and St. Mary's?
It does not.
Okay,
It does
good. I want to make sure.
It does not.
Yeah, carry on, please.
Through the warden, the area of the total forest cover in Perth County is 50,661 acres. The total area of the woodlands is 49,849 acres. The total area of the woodlots is 813 acres. So the woodlots are approximately 1.6% of the total forest cover of Perth County.
Say that again, sorry?
Yes,
Sure.
from the
So
top.
all the numbers or just the last piece?
No, just that last piece.
Last piece. The 1.6, so woodlots are 1.6% of the total forest cover of Perth County. Again, that is 813 acres.
We have it on the screen there as well.
Yes.
What page is that?
Page.
So the total, so you said the total area of the county, not including the two separate communities, it's 540,000?
538,630, yes.
538.
630.
630, okay. Total, and then of that, 50,661 is wooded.
Yes.
And of that, woodland is 49,849, and then woodlot, as currently defined, is 813.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Correct, Sager.
Thank you. So through the word, I'm going to kind of dial it back a little bit to Councilor Kasenberg's earlier point about the windbreak definition, as well as how that kind of is put into this recommendation. So maybe if Deputy Clerk Cannon kind of move up a little bit, but under the definition for windbreak and throughout the consultation of this, it was noted that potentially that the windbreak could be considered a woodlot, and that was some of the agricultural concern that we saw. So within the recommendation here, the exemption is in the woodlot and as well as the woodland. So if the definition for windbreak is endorsed by council, it would also potentially, again, if it's endorsed, to be included as an exemption in the woodlot and woodland. Going to Councillor Wilhelm's point of the definition between a windbreak and a living snow fence is the formulation of the definition for windbreak captures kind of the essence of a living snow fence by being 1 to 3 rows, planted trees with a separation of 20 meters to define the difference between a windbreak and a continuation into a potential woodlot or woodland. So I think we captured kind of the question from Councilor Kasenberg as well as Councilor Wilhelm with what's being recommended in the draft bylaw, just for, I think, some clarity.
What page was that on again? Sorry.
8, the windbreak.
Yeah, got it. Councilor Casey, go ahead.
So this brings us back then to the question of define what a woodlot is in this and include its, circumstances under the bylaw. And while I'm not keen to see a whole bunch of trees that look pretty removed and that have purpose removed, given the relatively small impact against the total tree canopy of Perth County, I think I'm starting to lean towards saying, let's just take that woodlot definition out. It's woodlands that we're concerned about. We'll protect those with vigor. And if we take out the wood lots, we still probably need the provision for windbreaks against woodlands because there could be an overrun. But generally, we're not going to lose it all. Like to Councillor Agat's points, I think people won't go crazy and take them all down. I don't think that's going to happen. But we're talking about a relatively small proportion of the forest cover based on the numbers that have been provided by staff. Thank you.
Any other Councillor McKenzie.
Well, I'm just gonna go back, I guess, I think maybe it was Councillor Wilhelm made a comment about windbreaks and living snow fences and, let the landowners have control. And I guess I wonder if we should have something here, because where the problem comes in, the original owner will plant the windbreaks, will plant the living snow fence. 25, 30, 40 years down the road, the farm changes hands, new owner comes in, and sometimes they're removed. And I'm not opposed to having them removed, but I wonder a stipulation there, as long as they're the legal size to take out, they could take them down. So they could take them down if they're the right size. It's just a matter of clearing land to gain a few more acres. I'm not sure that would be appropriate.
So yours, Councillor McKenzie, you're seeking some sort of detail in a definition that what trees would have to be of legal size defined elsewhere in order to be considered to be removed. Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor Duncan.
If we're gonna consider removing woodlots from the definition of the bylaw, then there's no sense protecting living snow fences or windbreaks either. Honestly, like, might as well just remove it from the bylaw altogether.
And make it exempt. But I guess as a comment, I noticed that Wellington County, in their bylaw, they exempt breaks in their bylaw. Deputy Warden Warren, you had your hand up.
No, I again go back to the input that we've had. I think we need to listen, and they definitely don't want the woodlot or the windbreaks. And at the end of the day, we all want to plant more trees, so we have to build this relationship with the farmers. And I do think the farmers are great stewards of this land, and we need to work with them.
Thank you, and if I could tie on, but again, Wellington County, the windbreaks are exempt. I've driven by Wellington County a few times over the years and noticed quite a few windbreaks, new ones being planted, so to your point. Anyone else? Or Clerk Sager, you had something?
Thank you. So through the warden, just to go to Councillor Duncan's point, is essentially that would be what would be looked at in this, is that windbreaks would be exempt from the woodlot or woodland. The intent behind this is more of like a legal standing, is that we still would welcome a definition be put in. So that way, if it had to go to prosecution later on down the road, you could distinguish between what is actually a windbreak and a woodland, right? Or a woodland. So that's kind of the justification behind it, is we still need to define it. So then that way there is no interpretation of, well, no, it's just a very excessively large windbreak. So we clarify that for potential prosecution.
Just making some notes here. So the distinction between the windbreak and the woodlot.
Right, and windbreaks would still, as recommended, be exempt through the woodlot or the wood land definition.
Yes, okay. Anything else? All right, I guess then we'll need a motion to provide the necessary direction to staff then, or?
Whatever. So through the order we.
Yeah, well, I'm asking you if you need that, then I'll turn to council to prescribe that. So Councillor McDermott, what do you wish to move?
What we have talked about getting the woodlots and the fences and notice of intent with the ability to somebody in there to have somebody review it if they're not happy.
Yeah, notice of intent, we've dealt with that one, so we're focused on the woodlots and the windbreaks.
Ordinance, if I might, strike the definition of woodlot from the next draft bylaw, but preserve exemption for windbreak as long as it is, in connection with woodland. Like you want to make sure that you cover that.
Okay. so I think Clerk Sager's advising that we break it into two
Sure.
separate directions, so.
So through the warden, I have it kind of pieced out a little bit. So understanding Council Caserbrook's point that council endorses the removal of the definition of woodlot within the tree injury bylaw. Deal with that, and then I have a secondary.
Okay, so you wish to move that, Councilor McDermott, and Councilor Casenberg, you wish to second that? Okay, is there any further discussion on that? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried, so that direction will carry forward to staff when they create the next draft. Okay, and then our next piece is windbreak part.
Thank you. So through the warden, the council endorses the definition of windbreak, and that council endorses the exemption of windbreak to be included in the definition of woodlands. Now that if we're proceeding with woodlots being removed, then we would only be looking at the woodlands piece.
Okay. Is there a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councilor Wilhelm. Seconder, please. Councilor Smith, any further discussion on that? Deputy Warden Orr.
Can you just clarify that? So you want to keep them in there for the definition of them, but you're still going to allow the farmers to remove them when they want to, with the exception of them bumping up to a woodland? I just want to clarify it.
Yeah, that's my understanding. We want to distinguish between windbreak and woodland, I'll just turn to Clerk Sager.
Yes, so through the warden, that was correct. It'd be council's decision, council's choice, if this is the draft that goes forward, and if approved, that a windbreak would be defined, but would ultimately be exempt. Anybody, I won't specifically say farmers, but anybody would be able to then, within the confines of the bylaw, be able to plant a windbreak, have the windbreak grow 20, 30 years down the line. If the bylaw still remains the same bylaw, then be able to remove it at that time. And again, as Stefan pointed out earlier, the bylaw is organic just as much as the trees are. Things can happen and change over time.
Mover and seconder for that. Yeah, okay. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Is there anything else that council wishes to give direction to staff? Deputy Warden Orr.
So page 3, the section of the purpose, I still very much would like to see incorporated in there, and going back to blue, CDEF, that we do take a perspective of the agricultural, recognizing the productive farmland, that we do include it for the purpose, because I definitely would like to recognize formal farming practices. And again, I go back to, we have to work with people, and we are at 8% of Perth County's population, but those 8% of the farmers are roughly managing 93% of the land base. So I really want to see a reflection of the input from the farmers and the purpose that we're going to work with them.
Okay. Are you looking to make that a motion?
I'd be happy to make that a motion to include, I think it's CDEF, with the recommended options
Okay,
from the
so-
blue one.
Page 2.
Yeah, from page 2.
Okay. CDE, subsection CDE, and introduce that into, or incorporate that into the, I'll call it the introductory part of the bylaw. Title and recitals, I guess, is what's bring there. Councilor Duncan.
Can I ask Stefan to explain just again why staff recommended not to include that?
Through the warden, the purpose of the bylaw, so the bylaw serves a function for the entire community, and in terms of bias, the recommendation was to ensure that the bylaw strictly keeps to the purpose of injuring, destroying, and remove trees, and at the same time maintaining and protecting forest, soil, fish, wildlife, and water resources on behalf of everyone. And at the same time, in terms of purpose, the idea is only to set out that this is the standards, approval, and responsibilities that the bylaw is seeking to enforce. And then if those are not met, potentially the bylaw lists. We have tried to keep it as lean as possible and as, in terms of ease of understanding, as concise as possible as well.
Any further discussion, or CEO, go ahead.
Just a thought for this through the warden, thank you. Some of this language, if council wanted, we could beef up the strategic plan in terms of language, if that would satisfy it, if we're not including it in this. That's another avenue.
So through the warden, as mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the bylaw is only one part of the overall policy that the county will have on tree canopy and natural vegetation. That policy will be required, and we will come to you with a much broader policy framework for you to consider and adopt as the policy that deals with various aspects of virtually all components of addressing natural vegetation. So that may be an avenue there as well to address it and to specifically state and focus that, rather than try to incorporate it within the context of the tree injury bylaw. Just a thought.
Maybe before, like, we have a motion made, and maybe before we continue, I should seek a seconder. If there's a seconder before we continue discussion here. Councilor Kelly wished a second, okay. All right, so
May I just read it so we know?
yeah, yes, but let's do that too.
Excellent. So, through the warden, Councilor, or Deputy Warden, or you can tell me if I need to refine it a bit. I think it's also important that we consider the recommended option inclusive. So what I've got written here is that council endorses the recommended option for the tree injury bylaw recitals inclusive of the public feedback recommendation sections C, D, E, and F. So the information still holds as what Stefan has recommended, because I think it's imperative we still have those, that change still be made. And then if you're making a motion for C, E, and F, that would be what we're going for.
Through the warden of clarification, the C, D, and F will remain within the recitals and not be moved part of the purpose of the bylaw? Is that the intent of the document that's right?
That's what's.
Yes, and I mean, I'd be happy even to have staff come back with combining C, D, and F. I just think there needs to be some responsibility that we are working under farming, regular farming practices. And I really did like the recommendation from CAO that we include that also in our strategic plan, but that's probably another conversation. But similar to what CDEF are, I would like to see something like that added.
Okay, and Councilor Kelly, want to second that? Okay. So we have a mover and seconder on that motion. Is there any further discussion?
I'm actually going to sort of lean in favor of keeping it concise. I think that the bylaw doesn't need this extraneous information. And the more information you put into a bylaw, the more you create potential interpretation demands and conflicts, which I'm not fully comfortable with foreseeing what those might be with these statements. So I do find myself thinking that this is not necessary. We adore our farming community. We do what we can to create a climate where farming is successful and appreciated. And I'm not sure that just putting some extra words in the recitals of the bylaw actually make a difference in terms of that deeper commitment that this council has shown, I think, over the years, including through an organized agricultural working group with council. So I'm just not convinced that we should do this. There should be some unforeseen consequences or downstream implications that just keep it simple.
Okay, thank you. So noted. Councilor Duncan.
I think that this would be great in the overarching policy. But I don't feel that it's a good spot in this bylaw for this stuff. I think the overarching policy would be a great spot to recognize everything in this. In the, sorry, and the public feedback in the A through F.
Anyone else? Counselor Smith?
Thanks, Deputy Warden. I don't see any issue with adding 1, 2, 3, 4 more lines that tie in recycle, so I think they should be included.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, all right, we have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Eight opposed. 8. Motion's defeated. Okay. Anything else?
So with the, sorry, through the words within the same breath, then is it an issue of council to proceed with the recommended option for the recitals?
Okay, I guess that's, well, okay, do we need a, I guess you're asking the questions, do we need to get the direction
We
formally?
do need something moving forward.
If I might, isn't the broader question that are we comfortable with everything else that is in here? Moving forward into the process with the revisions that we've requested as stipulated.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question, Councillor Casenberg, yeah, this will come, the direction given so far will be put into the next draft and updated accordingly. Then when the draft comes back again, then if there's anything else that between now and then we wish to bring up and discuss that we haven't dealt with already, then there's the opportunity to consider what we talked about, what the direction that's been given today, and then there's further opportunity for anything else that we may contemplate or think of between now and the next session. It's still in draft, so like there's always opportunity to go deeper if we feel we need to. That's what I'm trying to say here, so. Deputy Warden Orr.
Could you just clarify then, going back to Councillor Duncan, having the farmer agricultural stuff in a policy? When do we bring that back? Can we bring that back?
Well, I guess it's outside of what we're talking about here, but yeah, being as we're talking about it, I'll let the staff to give us an idea of where that fits in elsewhere and what the timing is.
So through the warden, that is something that staff have talked about, the need to bring forward that overarching policy. And that will require several divisions, obviously planning, working as probably the lead on that. I will go back and talk to staff to try and get an ETA on the work plan that would be involved in that. This obviously is a key piece where our priority has been focused. So that perhaps is something I can comment on when we come back with the actual draft to show you what that will look like. I know I can tell you through council, the last year of a council and the new year coming on, there's always onboarding. One of the first things we look at with the new council obviously would be the strategic plan. So obviously that document will be picked up in that review, but I'll be able to better comment on an ETA for the overall policy and with consideration for what you're looking for in here when we come back with this draft, the next draft of the tree injury bylaw. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, I don't see anything at this moment, so I'll turn to the resolution sheet that I've got here. I'll break it into two parts. First, the resolution recommendation involves that the council receives the tree injury bylaw draft update and presentation report. As we got a move by Councillor Wilhelm, seconded by Deputy Warden Orr. Any further discussion? Call the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. And then the second portion, the clerk may have to help me out here a little bit. That council directs staff to prepare a final proposed draft bylaw for consideration at a future council meeting. Is that wording sufficient? Okay. Councilor Reagan.
I have a question before.
Sure.
When will that be?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, so I'll turn to staff.
Thank you, through the warden. So it won't be at the next meeting, I can tell you that, because our key person is going to be going on vacation tomorrow. So I'll pass it over to staff. Did you give an ETA on that?
Potentially the second meeting in May.
The first, or which meeting, sorry? The second?
So that won't cause any issues with that we could be in lame duck? Because people could start in May putting their names in whether they're gonna run.
So through the warden, this bylaw should have no effect on lame duck. With restricted acts within the municipal act, there's the 4 areas in which could be affected. This is not one of them. So bylaw proceeding can proceed regardless if we have the numbers for restricted acts or not, and that calculation will be based off of once nominated closes the ballots.
So we're clear of any lame duck implications.
So through the warden, in short, yes, you're clear.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
One more. I just want to make sure that all council's going to be here. I think it's important that everybody can participate. And if they can't, maybe it needs to be a date that we all are here. I don't foresee anything that for me, but I don't know if there's others.
Yeah, we'll just do a quick check of council here, so.
What, you're saying May?
Sorry, through the warden, May 21st would be the second meeting in May.
I'll be back.
I'm supposed to be here, I need to be here, but double check. It's changed daily around here, so, no, I'm good for the date. So, good. I think everyone else is, so I guess May 21st will be our next rendezvous with this subject. All right, so did I have a mover and seconder? Oh, okay, so just, yes, please.
Okay, so through the warden, it would read as follows: the council directs staff to prepare a final proposed draft bylaw for consideration at the May 21st, 2026 council meeting.
Okay, recommendation then. Is there a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councilor Agates, second by Councilor Smith. Discussion? Not call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. All right. I wrote that back here. All right, so we've dealt with 8.1, section 9, council reports. None were submitted or received beforehand. So we'll move into 10 bylaws. 10.1, 4066-2026, the tender award for contract 2026-03103. The bylaw states that this be read a first, second, third time, finally passed this second day of April 2026. Mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councilor McKenzie, second by Councilor Wilhelm. Any discussion? All the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Colleagues, any notice of motions to be submitted? None were received ahead of time. Don't see any now. Other business, is there any other business? See any announcements? Maybe just a couple brief ones. Myself and Deputy Warden Moore had the privilege and honor of meeting with the Consul General of Ireland and Enterprise Ireland this week, as well as members of the DLG who put on the Dairy Expo. There was a dinner Tuesday night, so it was an excellent opportunity for networking and friendship, and very good evening and also attended by local agricultural industry people, whether it was in farmers themselves or in the ag service industry. It was a good, excellent time for networking. So thanks to Meredith Forget at Economic Development and Joni Gerber at Invest Stratford for coordinating that event. It's excellent. And both Deputy Warden Orr and I were at Dairy Expo yesterday for the opening. Again, an excellent event. They had the privilege of having Federal Agriculture and Agri-Food Minister Heath McDonald attend for the opening, as well as Senator Rob Black, native of Fergus in Wellington County. And it was also the Dutch Consul General was there as well. So very good day yesterday, and the expo continues today. Any other announcements that anyone wishes to make? Okay, seeing none. Closed session. We've got some work to do there in closed session. So a resolution that council moves into closed section at approximately 11:52 a.m. in accordance with section 239 of the Municipal Act SO 2001 C25 as amended, to consider the following: a matter pertaining to labor relations and negotiations, a verbal update regarding the paramedic service. So move and second, please. Moved by Councilman Kennedy, second by Deputy Warden Orr. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and we will go into closed session shortly. We are back into open session. We've concluded our closed session and discussed the item regarding the paramedic service. So now we're on to item 15, the confirmatory bylaw. Resolution reads as follows: is that that bylaw 4067-2026 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council of the corporation of the county of Perth at its regular meeting held April 2nd, 2026 is read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in 2026. Moved by Councillor Kellum, second by Councillor Kasenberg. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. And our final agenda item, we've covered all of our prescribed topics for today. Resolution reads as follows: that the council meeting be adjourned at approximately 12:03 p.m. Moved by Councillor Wilhelm, second by Councillor McKenzie. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. You're adjourned.